Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us at our very first OTT question time. Simon, actually, would you mind turning your video off? My name is Koza Kanji. I'm the editor of VOD Professional. OTT Question Time is a forum where we in the industry can carry on talking to each other about some of the most pressing issues actually going on in our industry right now. Obviously, we're in a state of high flux. TV viewing has never been so popular, TV and OTT viewing, and yet the bottom has fallen out of the advertising market. VOD subscriptions are going through the roof, at least for Netflix, and yet content production for movies, for primetime dramas, and for shiny floor shows has completely ground to a halt. So we're in a strange place. Obviously, lots of our colleagues as well may have been furloughed or let go entirely. So we're going to be talking about some of this, but actually today's forum is about the rise in TV and OTT viewing. And joining me on the panel are...
Peter Yorkty. I'm the CTO for Think Analytics.
Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Mitchell-Moore. I'm the Director of Nonlinear at A&E Networks.
And Richard?
I'm Richard Cooper. I'm a Research Director at the research agency Ampere Analysis.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Julie, actually, let's go to you first of all. How is it going at A&E Networks? How are your linear channels doing? How are your OTT services doing?
Well, first of all, I just thought I'd sort of tell you a little bit about what I'm responsible for, which is our OTT services, including our SVOD propositions, History, Play, and Crime Investigation Play. They're available on Amazon at the moment. Also our partner VOD, so the content that we provide to our partners like Sky, and also our AVOD brand, Blaze, where we have our own D2C app and also have a really successful partnership with My5. And so certainly what we've found over the last sort of few weeks, especially whilst we've been in lockdown, is that the linear channels have been performing incredibly well. They aren't sort of what we would call specialist channels, so focusing on history and focusing on crime. And I think it's at times like this that people kind of like to have more of their passion topics and like to, you know, go even deeper into what it is that they're interested in. So we've been really lucky that the linear ratings have been even better than we could have hoped for. Obviously, the advertising revenue is down, and that's a problem for everybody, more so for some of the terrestrial broadcasters than it is for us. But you know, that will recover in time, and what the advertisers seem to be doing at the moment is there's more different companies coming in, new advertisers, which is really interesting. When it comes to our OTT, we've been again doing really well. You know, there's been more subscriptions coming on, more viewing, just tapping into the sort of nation's desire to be sort of kept occupied during this busy time.
Can you tell us about any of the numbers in terms of your viewing, in terms of percentages, not necessarily actual?
Yeah, I probably can. So, I mean, certainly, I was trying to get it up in the background, but unfortunately my computer is not helping. But certainly for the linear, it's way above even what we were, you know, even above forecast. Right. So, which is great. And really good news, and not just sort of you know, a few percent. It's sort of into sort of double figures, which is good news. Yeah. And again, for our SVOD services, what's been good is that Amazon have extended our free trial period from 7 days to 30 days. So we've got more people coming in kind of than ever before to sample and to trial out sort of new services and to get to sample those kind of services.
Yeah. Richard, at Ampere Analysis, what's your opinion on what's going on in terms of TV? I mean, obviously TV and OTT viewing is on the rise. Yeah, but what are you finding? What are you hearing?
So, you know, there's been an awful lot of commentary about the sort of increase in viewing overall. You know, we've seen from the likes of Netflix, you know, the increase in the number of subscribers has gone sort of by far and away ahead of what they were expecting to see, even in their own guidance as a result of that. So, you know, there's no question that we're seeing, you know, a huge amount of increase in people's viewing habits. Now, obviously, that's directly connected to their the amount of free time that they've got. But in terms of some of the sort of broader underlying trends that we're seeing, we're seeing an increase in the number of people subscribing to additional services. So we already see, a relatively high level of SVOD stacking, so people accessing different services. But now we're starting to see people increasing the number of services that they access as a result of the lockdown.
What was the number before about the number of video services that, on average, a household might subscribe to? Because
it does depend on the market that you're looking at. So for markets like the US, it was sort of hovering around the 3 SVOD services. In terms of the number of SVOD services stacked, about 3. For countries like the UK, it's about 1.8. So that was what it was sort of prior to the lockdown. Yeah. I can't give you the numbers of the sort of total number of services that are sort of viewed or accessed by consumers. I'd have to do a little bit more work on our app to give you those numbers. Yeah. But certainly from those sort of SVOD and VOD perspectives, we've seen that increasing really over the course of the last year. But what's happening now is going to be accelerating that.
Right. As a question to you all, I mean, less industry question, but more sort of as a human question. I keep hearing in the industry, a lot of people that I talk to say, I don't actually watch that much TV. Yeah. Do you watch much TV, you three?
Way too much. Way too much. So I've got no excuse for not logging on to every single service that pops up. So, the more service launches that happen, the more logons I accumulate. So I think my latest one was the Quibi launch. So I had to go straight to, I can't remember the name of the show now. That's terrible, isn't it? The episode about the Golden Arm. Just because it's had so much sort of crazy press, and it is every bit as bad as we've been told. But yeah, I have just literally finished rewatching Firefly. So
right,
that probably not only ages me but also stereotypes me as well.
Peter, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think just as a follow-up to the last question as well, I mean, we are in analytics, we are seeing big increases in both the volume of users and also the amount of viewing across all the customers that we are running the recommendation service for. And those are going from, anywhere from 30% increases in user numbers through to triple figures. So hundreds of % increases in the number of viewers to some of our VOD customers. And we're seeing the same thing on broadcast and linear services as well. Yeah. And yeah, from our perspective, we're certainly way above the 1.8 services that we subscribe to in our household, that's for sure.
Yeah. Julie?
Yes and no, just to be difficult. So no, I'm on my commute into work. I often watch a lot of content then, so I'm missing out on those times at the start and the end of each day. But generally, in the evening, I'm watching a lot more content, and sort of signed up to Disney Plus on the day, and we've worked our way through all the Marvel films, having a 14-year-old son. So that's been sort of great and a great addition to our household.
Yeah, I wasn't just asking that question academically. I also have an idea that we build up TV habits. Yeah, so when we weren't all stuck at home, we would go to work, go to the office, and then when we'd get home, we'd sort of be cooking. And at that point, our TV rota habit might kick in. So the first thing I used to do, for example, is see what was on the TV guide. Yeah, so is there anything on linear that I might want to watch? After that, if there was nothing on linear, I would go to the recordings on my Sky box, to see if there was anything that I'd recorded over the last couple of days that might be interesting. Then after that, I would fire up Netflix probably, and then Amazon, and usually in that order. Yeah, and I wonder how people's TV habits have changed now that we are all stuck at home. Richard, you had some data, I think, about demographics and about who in what age groups is watching what. Yes.
Certainly, in terms of the types of content that they're watching. So, if we just look at the sort of UK perspective, what we're seeing is for a lot of VOD audiences, they've been progressively getting older and older, or certainly more representative of the wider demographic mix of the UK. And we've seen, certainly over the course of the last sort of 18 months, that a lot of the VOD services have been changing the types of content that they show and their commissions in order to drive that. So we're seeing an acceleration in the volume of older consumers moving to, or certainly investigating, VOD services. So I think to Julie's point earlier, they're simply sort of, the lockdown is effectively sort of forcing them to sort of sample and try out, some of those services that previously they may have heard of, but simply not bothered to investigate, with broadcast and possibly, a main sort of VOD service, was meeting their needs. So as well as sort of more services sort of falling under that sort of heading of what is acceptable for people to watch, they've also been investigating other services in order to gain access to more content. So that VOD viewing demographic has got older, and with so many people, effectively as a captive audience, we're seeing that increase.
Yeah. There was always an idea as well, wasn't there, that younger people weren't watching content on big TVs. I'm sort of pointing at that TV behind my shoulder. They watched more on personal screens, so tablets and smartphones. Is there any evidence of that having changed over the past few weeks? Are kids watching more big screen TV?
So I can't comment directly on what's been happening as a result of the lockdown, but in terms of wider viewing, we know that an awful lot of viewing, not just for the kids, but predominantly, they are viewing a lot of content through their mobile. It's a personal screen. I think that's how we have to view it, rather than the main screen in the home, which a lot of us, including myself, don't really get much of a say over what goes onto that screen. So sort of mobile viewing, an awful lot of that occurs actually within the home. So, when we see the launch of services like QB, who are focused on mobile viewing, yes, they've missed some of the audience like Julie, who would watch content whilst on her commute. But actually, mobile viewing, as viewing increases, mobile viewing in the home will have been increasing at the same time. Not least because particularly if you're in a sort of multiple person household, there is only one main screen in the home. If you've got a personal screen, you will be using that for your content. Yeah.
Julie, have you got any? Sorry, go on.
The Global Web Index have come out with some information actually, which is quite pertinent, which is sort of the Gen Z and the millennials. Yes, they're watching even more kind of online videos and streaming TV more, but broadcast TV is up with their viewing. So Gen Z is up 24% and millennials are up 35%. So they are being drawn back, but in the greater pie of things, they're just watching more of everything. So everything's sort of going up.
Yeah. And when you and I were chatting in advance of this session, Julie, you were saying that in terms of demographic data, you don't have much of that. Is that right? But obviously you have genre data.
I mean, obviously for linear, we get everything. We have Barb and things like that. But for some of our services, we don't get demographics. Some we do. But the ones that we do get very much fit the profiles in terms of gender as linear, although they tend to be much more 50-50. So, with history, it's much more sort of male focused on linear, but it's slightly more sort of 50-50 sort of on demand. And it tends to be much younger. Where we do get data. Some of the platforms we're on, we don't get data for when it comes to demographics.
Right. Have you got any screen data, any device data?
Yeah, so certainly through our partnership with My5, we get data as to what devices, whether it's on YouView or Roku, or whether it's iOS or Android and things like that. So we do get some of that data from some of our partners. Yeah.
Right. And has there been any change that you've noticed over the last few weeks?
Well, some of it we only get monthly data, so when we get April's, it'll be really interesting to see and compare whether there's been a shift in the kind of platform viewing. Yeah.
Peter, how are people finding content, as in viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the traditional guides and so on, but more and more, people want to get to the content much more quickly, especially in the world where people are using multiple OTT services as well as pay TV, and it'd be very easy for them to get fed up launching multiple apps, trying to remember where content is within those apps, as well as navigating the guide. So I think more and more really trying to reduce the time to content. So getting exactly the right shows in front of people as quickly as possible, before they fed up and move on to one of the other services that they're subscribing to. So adding personalization, not just into, the fifth screen down as part of the navigation, but getting it right up front, on the homepage, make it easy for people, whether it's to binge view or, what they normally watch at that time of day, or like we've talked about, once people get a bit more fatigue and they've binge watched everything that they've ever were interested in before, really helping them to discover all the other content that's available on those platforms, rather than just falling back to the same few shows that they watch, every week, or watching an entire series of 10 seasons of, something that they liked 5 years ago. You can do that for so long, but then I think people are looking for something new to watch, something that's going to be, within their interests, but not just another episode of their favourite shows. So I think getting the right content out there and showcasing the best, or the breadth and the depth of content that's available, whether it is on a pay TV service, whether it's linear, VOD, ad-funded, across all these different platforms, capturing people's attention and keeping them engaged is equally as important as it's always been.
I've certainly noticed, I've noticed that, platforms are doing everything they can to kind of bundle content together. So, Netflix are doing Watch Together with older kids. Amazon Prime are doing a 2009 sports rewind for those of us missing kind of the live sports. And Apple are doing a kind of stronger together, uplifting stories of human relationships, to sort of tap into that. The zeitgeist at the moment of kind of uplifting stories that people kind of want to hear.
I used to have an idea that on Netflix there should be something called a suicide lock, which is basically that you can't watch content that you've been watching with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You can't watch it unless you both put your passwords in at the same time, so nobody can get ahead of the other one. Peter, about content recommendation, who's doing it well? I mean, who has lots of content that hasn't been watched yet that could be surfaced to consumers, to viewers?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think across all operators, they've got large libraries of content, and there's only so much that you can put in front of somebody at any one time. And I think there is a lot of evidence about the amount of time that people are prepared to spend navigating and browsing and clicking.
Yeah.
Before they just throw their hands up and say there's nothing on. And so I think everybody's been in that position, maybe not every single day, but at times. And so I think everybody can do better, and think of more interesting ways of getting the right content and engaging people to watch that content. So I think across all of the libraries that people have, and all the channels that people have, people who might be paying for 2, 3, 4, 500 channels as part of their linear TV package, their OTT platforms, will have thousands or tens of thousands of VOD assets to watch. So there's plenty of content, and it really is a case of trying to get that content in front of people
Yeah.
at the right time with the right message, and not have them having to scroll down 10, 15 pages or left or right in order to find something.
So this, Julie, back to your point, is where curated collections do work.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's that age-old debate of sort of personalization versus curation. And I think personalization is great for recommending you more of the same, more of what you like. But it's the editorial curation that comes in that will show you something different, that will show you something new that maybe you didn't think you needed, but actually, if everyone else is watching it, then I definitely want to watch it as well.
Yeah. I mean, A&E and the channels that you work on, by definition, they're almost kind of curated already.
Absolutely, the sort of the clues in the titles of history and crime and investigation, and that really helps to cut through the noise of trying to get people in, because they will know whether they like it or not. People can identify with those themes immediately.
How about content production? Is A&E, I mean, I'm talking about, and then specifically history and crime, the channels that you work on, how badly, if at all, has it been affected by social distancing and basically content production coming to a halt?
Well, I mean, there's definitely been an impact. I think all broadcasters have seen, an impact to their production slates. Some things obviously have already been already in the can, so that's great. And things have been moved up. Even sort of BBC moved up Killing Eve to bring that forward to tap into that, which helped them with their sort of biggest ever figures back in March. And we're to some extent we're the same. We've definitely got things in the can. We've got things kind of coming up. I think the interesting thing that broadcasters will be facing is in sort of months to come, sort of 6 months, 12 months down the line, where are we at there? How is that going to be impacting kind of on production? And the schedules, how will that impact? But there's plenty of content out there. It's more things that were kind of stuck in the pipeline, I guess, that will be sort of impacting in the months to come.
I saw the Netflix letter to shareholders a couple of days ago when the results came out, and in it they said that they already had 200 more shows in post-production, sorry. Yeah. So it doesn't sound like they're going to run out of content yet. But Richard, have you got any thoughts on this? Because you've also been looking at the Netflix data over the last couple of days, right?
Oh, very much so. So Netflix have said that actually they're more likely to be sort of seeing a content gap as they move into 2021, given the volume of content that they already have. They've said that they work very far ahead compared to a lot of other production companies, and I think that is true to some extent. A lot of the stoppages that we've seen at the moment, actually, they will start to impact on those shows, whether they may well have missed their effectively a production window, in terms of cast members and crew, or even shooting locations. So, there will be, quite a lot of issues, particularly restarting. Some of those shows will never restart, I think is true to say. So there is likely to be a content gap coming up as a result. But as Julie said, anything that's sort of currently in the can and has been moved to post-production, we're going to see that coming onto, in terms of the scripted content, we're going to see that coming onto all the various different services, as you'd normally expect. So that content gap is going to be some way out. So maybe not for sort of 4 to 6 months will we start to see sort of changes in scripted schedules as a result of those production stoppages. When it comes to unscripted content, obviously the impact has been much sharper. They have much shorter production cycles, so we're already missing quite a lot of that content. But what seems to have risen up in its place is quite a lot of sort of COVID-19 sort of themed content, sort of typically short form, typically sort of comparatively low production values, often sort of filmed on people's phones and obviously in people's homes. And we've actually seen about 161 actually COVID themed titles popping up as commissions over the course of the last 4 weeks.
On
now, just to give you an idea of how quickly they're being sort of pushed out, about 2/3 of them are already available for consumers to watch. So they're not they are sort of filling that unscripted gap, shall we say.
That's not just on Netflix, right? The 116 shows.
No. So the vast majority of them are actually coming from public sector broadcasters and the sort of commercial broadcasters themselves as well, and simply to sort of fill in a lot of those sort of magazine gaps effectively left by magazine shows and other sort of unscripted content. So, I don't think it's fair to say that they are ever going to be sort of long-term shows. So, we're not expecting sort of successive series of them unless we enter additional lockdowns, and then who knows. But they're filling that sort of that gap in what would otherwise be sort of ordinary sort of run-of-the-mill sort of talk shows, game shows, and other unscripted content.
Talking of Netflix, by the way, I think I remember some data from the most recent TiVo video index entertainment report, and I think they were saying that in the US, at least, households are now subscribing to up to 6.4 SVOD services each. But then there has been an explosion in the number of SVODs in the States. So I kind of get that. And what's the data around Disney? It had 5 million subscribers in the UK, right? A month after launch.
It was 50 million globally.
How many, sorry?
The last figure I saw was 50 million globally.
Yes, thank you, Gavin.
That's my pleasure. Sorry, I had to say something.
No, that's all right. Charles Dawes, are you in the conversation as well?
Yes.
Because if you are, Charles Dawes is from TiVo, and it was 6.4, wasn't it? 6.4 households in the US.
Yes, correct.
Right. Did you have?
And it covers obviously that covers multiple video services, both paid and free sources.
Right. Okay. Did you have any UK data, or was it just US?
It's just US from that report.
Okay. And can you remind us, please, what's exactly the name of the report so that people can find it afterwards?
It's the Video Trends Report.
Right. Okay.
And I can send you a link, and then you can send it out to everyone if they're interested.
I'll do that. Yes. Thanks, Charles. I'm so new to Zoom that I didn't even know that people would do that. Yeah, just chip in with bits of information. It's just great. Yeah, we can extend question time out, not just to the three panelists, but to everybody who's in the audience as well. Actually, since we're talking about that, if anybody wants to ask a question, then I will come to the audience in a couple of minutes. I guess I just have a couple more questions myself. One is that is this working quite well, in terms of broadcast and OTT, while we are all stuck at home? Yeah, we know that people are watching more TV, but are we eventually going to get tired of this glut of content that is now available? Or are we going to carry on watching, carry on binging as long as we can?
So I think Netflix were quite clear that they're expecting sort of consumers to revert back to old behaviours. They're actually expecting a downturn, following the end of the lockdown, in terms of their subscribers and in terms of viewership. And I think there's certainly a fair amount of truth to that. People will return to older old habits. At the moment, we have got a huge amount of access to content, which is going to go away. So a lot of free access, a lot of sort of free 90-day passes or 30-day passes have been issued, and it's going to be about how many of those are then sort of maintained sort of post-lockdown. But I think there's likely to be a bit of a backlash. Once people are released from their homes, we are going to want to go out and experience the world once more, rather than sit at home sort of binge watching TV.
Right. Do you think there'll be mass Woodstocks? Everybody's going to get to the outside.
I hope not. I think that's just a way of getting more lockdowns in future, more mass gatherings.
Well, I mean, the other thing I keep hearing is that there are going to be a lot of babies born around Christmas, right? Because we're all stuck indoors.
And divorces.
Well, yeah. Julie, from your perspective as a broadcaster, how do you think the broadcast model is operating versus OTT and just about all the content that is available? Is it sustainable, this viewing?
Well, no, I think we're also heading into summer as well. I think if we were heading into winter and people were staying home anyway more naturally, I think it would, it would level out, sort of, it'd be a shorter decrease. I think it's inevitable, as Richard said, that there will be a decrease again. But I think people will still sort of, there will be that sort of legacy where people will remember what they've been watching, and their affiliations to content or to platforms will increase. And certainly from our point of view, whilst we're not sort of necessarily launching more products, we're definitely launching on more platforms. And so we're trying to get our message out sort of wider, and that hasn't stopped because of the lockdown. If anything, it's sort of increased. And we're looking to launch on sort of 10 more platforms across Europe, Middle East and Africa in the next sort of 3 months. So for us, it's got busier, I think. Right.
Lisa?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is there could also be the pent-up demand for sports content. So some types of content obviously could well decline after the lockdown is over. But on the other hand, all of the sports that have been put on hold, if they're going to complete their programs, whether it's football leagues, tennis, F1, cricket, all these other types of events, we still don't know how much crowd participation there might be allowed in terms of actually physically being there. And there's lots of talk of live sports potentially being broadcast times they wouldn't normally be broadcast, like on a Saturday afternoon. And some of these competitions will want to complete in a more compressed time frame. So there could be a downturn on the one hand for some types of content, and on the other hand, the pent-up demand for the big sports fans could soften that downturn and cause an upturn of its own. So there could be a bit of a combination of effects there.
Yeah, and the broadcasters that rely on linear ad revenue, the biggest commercial broadcasters, they desperately need that content, sports and their primetime content as well. Because the paradox of all of this, of course, is that we're watching way more TV, but but broadcasters who rely on linear advertising aren't, well, the bottom's fallen out. Yeah, they're definitely not making more money. Let's open this up to the audience. We've got about 13 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? And you're welcome to chip in with video as well as audio, if you like.
I have a question. Oops, sorry, go on. Go ahead.
No, this is Alan McLennan in San Francisco, of all places, right? In support of what the conversation's been, is what we're finding here, it's everywhere else as well. Ironically enough, I'm actually talking to you right now off my phone because our network, our Comcast network here in Marin County, north of San Francisco, is down. And so that's just how many, participants are trying to mount the systems. It's been very challenging to try to meet this and have the kind of content that we're having. But I wanted to kind of throw in just another point here, and that is, as an industry, we've been building and building and building for many years with OTT and new types of programming. And yes, Netflix is growing, and they've added another $15 billion in the last few weeks, as far as and not the dollars, but the viewers. They've really grown. The fact of it is that we have a new normal. We've finally tipped over, and OTT and content streaming has become that new network, that new engagement that Charles so aptly put within the video trends report of 6.4 here. It's true. I get asked pretty much, well, comfortably weekly, if not daily, what services should I subscribe to? And that has been consistent. And we're finding that there's little services like Curiosity Stream has just gone through the roof. New types of networks, but this is the new normal. We talk about this on an ongoing basis as the new normal. Well, you know what, guys, gals, we're finally at a point where this has become real. OTT and IP delivery of content they're not going back. There might drop a service or two, but they have come comfortable with this, and they're addicted to whatever programming that they have and the ease of programming. And I think what we need to do is get ready for what is going to happen and the boom that's going to take place. So I'm on my mobile phone right now, connecting into the wireless network. So I'm just going to mute and just put that thought out there.
Anybody care to respond to that? Because we actually sort of half talked about this just before we got on the call, right?
Yeah, so I think it's certainly sort of true to say that people, having experimented with new services, are likely to sort of continue with some of them over the course of, as we move out of the lockdown. I don't think it's fair to say that this is necessarily, the new normal, but it's certainly sort of forced people to sort of investigate new types of content delivery. Ironically, sort of slightly undermining Alan's point, he's had to connect sort of via mobile, so there are limitations to what can be done, over a broadband network, and certainly when it comes to things like live events and sports, as well as sort of weekly scheduled sort of event programming as well.
Yeah.
Broadcast remains, the only feasible way that these events and this programming can be delivered. So, yes, there is going to be some difficulty for a lot of broadcasters as we go through, and this has certainly started to, accelerate, some of the changes that were inevitable within the market. But it's not going to be as wholesale a change, I think, as some are predicting.
Julie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think consumers will continue to pay for things that they get value out of, and they will continue to watch things they get value out of. I think, if any of these services stop providing that, or weaken their propositions, that's when you see people start to churn. So I think it's the the responsibility of these services to make sure that you've always got a product that's worth paying for or worth watching.
Yeah, Alan, can we get you back for a sec? Your video, because isn't it the case in the States that you do have?
The phone tipped over just a bit. Sorry.
No, it was me. It was me moving. Yeah.
It might be rather laid back here in California.
Isn't it the case in the States that obviously the environment that you guys were in, pay TV was predominant, until lately, and that you're cutting the cord and therefore building up OTT subscriptions, whereas obviously in the UK it's slightly different. We've been used to free to air and then digital TV through a box, so we're used to getting most of our channels just coming in linear without having to pay for them with Freeview. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely true. We've been having that for some time across the states, not just here in California, but Chicago and New York, Charles, there has been that kind of openness, shall we call it. However, it's been in small numbers. Now what's changed is, there is a lemming community. People like to jump on certain things, and for sometimes it was cut the cord because we wanted to go that way. Now the value's, been seen, and I think that's where the underlying shift will take place. You've been with the red button. You've had a lot of different things, as you know. I've spent a lot of time in the UK, and the fact of it is that yes, the digital delivery is much more mature there. However, like I'm experiencing right now with this network and Comcast, and getting some fluttering right at the moment, is not being able to meet the demand, and that is what's driving that is viewership and content. Believe it or not, the viewer numbers right now are late morning and early afternoon. Like 11 to 3 has got very high news coverage. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is doing his daily noon broadcast over IP, and that is changing a lot of viewing. We have a community on the other side of the hill here in Marin, in Mill Valley, over in Bolinas. As of today, we'll finish up testing 1,700, all of their residents with the antibody test. And there are trucks out there, and everything's being pumped up, connected by Comcast. This may be the problem, though, now that I think of it. And they're gathering these results live within this community. The community shut off its road. People can't go in and out unless you're local. And they're finding whether or not where the community stands. So people have really changed here. That little town's called Bolinas, and if anybody wants any of the information, I'm happy to provide it through Sanjay. So in the course of this, yeah, we're just now starting to experience the explosion. San Francisco and the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, you know, we kind of been living it, but in the rural markets out in Sacramento and in the valleys, Nevada, they're now starting to really jump on the bandwagon when it comes to video streaming over IP.
Great, thanks, Alan.
I think
Sorry,
Kaiser, but just following up on what Julie said earlier, you know, I think one thing that hasn't changed, and maybe some services now have an opportunity because people are subscribing to more OTT services than they had before, is that within that, whether it's the first month or, you know, a free trial period, or when somebody's subscribing now to a new service that they didn't before, you know, those services have got that 30-day window to show the value, to showcase the content they've got. You can get that, the best of both worlds of, you know, the personalization to say, okay, learn as fast as you can from the early interactions, base the rest of the content that's available on those platforms, combine that with editorial curation, you know, personalizing those editorial rails so that when the lockdown down comes out, or just ongoing into the future, as more and more services are month-to-month subscriptions, you know, it's even more important that you show value for money of that package that somebody's paying for, and show not just that you can binge through everything in the first month, but that you've actually got a sustained viewing that you can keep going over months and years.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I mean, I can chip in with another one, but if anybody has questions.
I have one.
Right, so this is Gavin.
Yeah,
Gavin,
hi.
tell us who you are.
Gavin McLaughlin. I'm ex-GFK. I was part of the team, or controlled the team, who launched BTTV some time ago. I was also at the BBC and did most of the public speaking for the launch of Freeview. So that's my TV credits. I was wondering, with all of these new services coming out for VOD, whether the piracy element of this market was now being therefore squeezed out, because there are so many different viewing options. You have a lot of different approaches to get to the content that you want. And with all of the offerings that these guys are making, is that going to effectively move us away from the piracy that we had in the past?
I can chip in on this. So I think with the sort of advent of sort of binge viewing being made available to consumers, we saw, you know, quite a lot of piracy dropping away as a result of that. You know, people are no longer hunting down, you know, the next episode of a particular TV show. With things like The Mandalorian, where we've seen episodic releasing and sort of differential episodic releasing between different territories, I think we're starting to see that promoting a sort of almost a return to piracy in many ways. You know, as soon as you put a piece of content on the screen somewhere in the world, someone will pirate it and push it out to somebody who hasn't got access to it. You know, the volume of new services, you know, one of the things in terms of adopting those services, people are very much sort of pursuing the content that they're interested in when they start subscribing, or indeed just switch to one of the ad-supported services. So, yeah, because they are sort of fairly low or no cost of entry at the moment, you know, it's not going to be sort of encouraging in piracy in the same way. But as soon as we switch back to a pay model, you know, there's going to be a limit to the number of people who are going to want to subscribe to a single service just so they can watch that key piece of content. So, you know, the volume of sort of multiple places you can get only one, so the multiple exclusives that come from multiple services, you know, people are going to be chasing those. And if piracy is an easier option, that a lot of consumers will take it.
Gavin, do you know a company called Cinemedia?
No, I don't.
I'll send you a link afterwards. I'm just looking at, I went to their IBC briefing last year when human beings could actually get together in places. And there's a quote I've got from the briefing. We're only at the beginning of pay TV privacy, said their chief product officer. In some countries, the scale of privacy is such that it matches the revenues of the local pay TV market.
Woo.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just
Interesting.
really just one additional comment. I'm sorry. This is Rick Scavanagh with Think Analytics in the U.S. One challenge that we continue to see is the account sharing. So that revenue curve, is a challenge. It's unpredictable at this point because it is a competitive advantage now for OTT providers. In a way, how many accounts are they allowing folks to sign in? How many people can sign in per account? So you're moving from a subscriber model to a user model, and now where do you put the limitation of the number of users per account? So that's a big challenge today, at least in the US, is the account sharing piece.
I think that's the same everywhere, to be honest.
Yeah, so that's certainly, the curve, the projection on the revenue becomes a very challenging piece as you kind of look forward beyond where we're at today.
Yeah, I mean, the advent of sort of a lot of ad-supported services. So we're seeing a lot of AVOD sort of services kicking off over the course of this year. And I think, they kind of sidestep that issue. You can watch for free, provided you enjoy the advertising as well. So, that does help to negate some of that sort of account sharing problems. So, when we have some hybrid services like Hulu, that is kind of sort of typical of, I think, where a lot of the VOD market is headed.
Alan, you've turned your video on again.
On that. That's right.
No, yeah, I turned back on only because I wanted to kind of step back a little bit when it comes to post-production and basically filling the content gap. One of the things that here, a lot of discussion and a lot of work is being done within the studios with remote editing to fill that production lag. And what we're finding is like Adobe and EditShare and AWS and Azure are really stepping up to provide these kinds of services currently. And it's been fascinating to watch this, again, behavioral shift go over within this supply chain, this media chain of development that we have, and the need to fill the viewer's consumption. Well, there's a lot of, there's just thousands of titles. Personalization delivers a lot, but I don't think I can watch another 2008, NBA Basketball Association playoff again. I mean, we need live content. And so what we're finding as a member of the Producers Guild and some of the questions that we're having in these kinds of calls is discussing the remote editing. And I'm just curious, we've been talking about the BBC and what you're doing. Are you finding that your facilities are, engaging remote editing currently to capture new forms of content, or is it all just everybody getting back into the offices to work?
I'm not sure who that question directed at, but I mean, the UK is still in total lockdown, so nobody's getting back into offices at all here in the UK, and I think that's true of the rest of Europe as well. So, I think maybe sort of Julie's better place to.
Well, that's what I was looking for Julie to maybe make a comment on that.
Yeah, so certainly from our point of view, all of our, a lot of our, even our commissions, some of them are being edited in Mexico. And so, that's just how it's sort of working at the moment.
Yeah, I was on something last week where the editor was actually just out on the outskirts of London. The other EP was in Netherlands. Another editor was in Sydney, Australia. And there was this activity on this particular project that I was fortunate enough to be looking at with almost incredibly low latency. They were working, it wasn't HD content, of course, but it was definitely doing the cuts and rough cuts to be able to share at a later time. And I think that's coming back to a little bit of a shift in the industry as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there are paths that are being addressed and new behaviors being explored to address all of this glut that we may be having to come up against. By the way, I'm Alan McLennan. I've got Patam Media Group based out of San Francisco, and probably many on the, I hope, the many on this call probably recognize at least the name, if not the big head. So.
Kaiser, Chris Welsh
yes.
here. Hi, Chris Welsh.
Chris Welsh, right.
Chris Welsh, I'll put on my video actually. So very close. Chris Welsh from MPB Global. Just to circle back on Rick's comment on the password sharing or cheating, depending how aggressive you want to be on that topic. But I think there are some quick wins on that. I think that the OTT industry has been guilty on relying on concurrency rules to mitigate that issue. But as you know, I can share a Netflix account with my parents in Ireland if I wished, and that would be very easy for us both to access the platform. But I think Now TV in the UK, powered by Sky, our client, they do it in a different way, and I think really adds that extra layer to protect their own revenues. And since they introduced this program, they've reduced password sharing quite significantly. So they lock down how many devices you can hold against your account. I appreciate that's not rocket science or anything new, but the third layer, as well as concurrency and how many registered devices you can have against your account, they add a third one, which is limiting how many changes to your devices you can make within a predefined period. Yeah. So if you're delivering on those metrics, you can go a long way to mitigating the password sharing and cheating problem the industry faces.
Thank you very much, Chris. And we've run over time, so unless anybody has any other brilliant questions, I'm going to close the session there. Thank you very much for the three panelists, to Julie Mitchell-Moore from A&E Networks, to Pete Doherty from Think Analytics, and to Richard Cooper from Ampere Analysis. Next week, almost certainly, we're going to be talking about roadmaps, about technology, product, and operational roadmaps, and what's going on with those inside broadcasters and operators, if anything, if it hasn't all just completely come to a standstill. Also, if you have any subjects that you think that we should talk about in future panels, then please feel free to send those through to me. This video is going to be made available at some point over the next 48 hours, 48 hours even, 28 would be pretty specific. Thank you all very much for joining. Thanks.